Dan Jones, The Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England. In The Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England, Dan Jones takes us on an enthralling journey through the birth and evolution of the Plantagenet dynasty, which shaped England and left a lasting legacy. This book summary delves into the lives, politics, and personal relationships of the Plantagenet monarchs, chronicling the many ups and downs they faced as rulers. From the turbulent reigns of Matilda, Geoffrey of Anjou, and Henry II, to the groundbreaking Magna Carta and the indomitable Edward III, readers will discover the intricate workings of nearly 300 years of English history, bringing to life the legendary tales of power, betrayal, and war.
The Anarchy and the Rise of the Plantagenets. In 1120, King Henry I's son dies, leaving him with no direct heir. He turns to his daughter Matilda, who he marries off to Geoffrey of Anjou to secure his dynasty. Despite not liking each other, they have a son named Henry. But when King Henry I dies, the barons reject Matilda, and instead support Stephen as their king. Stephen's weak leadership destabilizes England, leading Matilda to believe she can take the crown back. Thus begins the Anarchy, a 9-year period of chaos and devastation as Matilda and Stephen's forces fight for the crown. Meanwhile, Matilda's son Henry is growing up and building a reputation for himself as a skilled strategist. He catches the attention of Eleanor of Aquitaine, and together, they give rise to the Plantagenets, a powerful dynasty. Henry II, the Rise and Fall. After 9 years of war in 1153, the exhausted English barons accepted Henry's offer of peace in exchange for him becoming king. Crowned as King Henry II, he quickly secured his position with the birth of his 4 children. Henry enjoyed success in France, but trouble brewed in England as the church became a nuisance, and his advisor Thomas Becket sided with the church on nearly all matters. In a fit of rage, Henry made a provocative insult towards Becket, which inspired 4 knights to murder him in Canterbury Cathedral. Henry fled to Ireland, and upon return to his realm, faced divine punishment as his wife and 3 eldest sons rose up against him. The Plantagenet Crown. King Henry and his family engage in a rebellion that fails to dethrone him. Although his family's rebellion fails, the king's consolidation of power and control over England's criminal system strengthens the Plantagenet Crown's hold over the country. After Henry's death, Richard the Lionheart takes the throne and leverages his image as a great warrior to launch the Third Crusade. He partners with King Philip II of France, but their relationship disintegrates as both leaders become increasingly distrustful of each other. Triumph and Tragedy of a Crusading King. King Richard the Lionheart's triumphs and tragedies are chronicled in this book. His journey to the Holy Land is littered with disagreements with his French counterpart, Philip II. After returning home, Richard is captured and held for ransom but is eventually released. He faces further challenges from his treacherous brother, John, who replaces him as king after Richard's death. John's cruel actions lead to his downfall, and he abandons all Plantagenet claims in Europe. John's reign of greed. King John is known for his cruelty and avarice during his reign as the King of England. While portraying himself as a just ruler, he exploited his power to accumulate immense wealth. His acts of oppressing the Jewish community and imposing excessive taxes on barons are just a few examples of his ruthless governance. However, after a massive defeat in battle, John's reign faces internal rebellion. This leads to Runnymede, where he finally meets with barons to compromise and establish the Magna Carta, a document that sets a precedent for the king's powers to be limited and to act in accordance with the law. Rise and Fall of English Kings. The incompetent reign of King John and his son Henry III, characterized by political instability and the growth of Simon de Montfort's influence, is marked by the signing of Magna Carta and the escalation of civil war, leading to de Montfort's de facto rule and Prince Edward's captivity. In 1215, shortly after war resumed, King John died, which marked the end of his ill-suited reign. Although he was an incompetent political figure, Magna Carta rescued his legacy as an astounding and influential document that defined the relationship between the king and his subjects. John's son, Henry III, was placed under the protection of his father's royalist supporters since he was only 9 years old when his father died. Henry's entire reign was characterized by an endless search for guidance and fatherly support since he lacked a proper father figure. The barons refused to let him rule his own government until he was 27, and then, they clung tightly to Magna Carta to prevent him from having too much control. Although Henry was an incompetent political figure, he understood the need to maintain his image when he married a well-connected French princess, which was a king-worthy wedding. However, his sister's surprise union with the glamorous courtier Simon de Montfort grew political animosity toward Henry and rankled the barons. Tension was briefly interrupted by the birth of his first son, Edward, in 1239, but a royal baby couldn't hide the crisis forever. Henry's madcap scheme to invade Sicily worsened the relationship with the barons because they didn't think that it was a wise move. In 1258, 4 armed men broke into the king's quarters and informed him that the realm would now be run by a committee of barons. The committee of barons forced the king to change some policies, but this didn't bring stability. The increasingly rebellious Simon de Montfort grew in influence, which sparked a civil war between the opposing forces of de Montfort and the king. The two sides met in battle at Lewes in 1264. Despite his brilliant performance, Simon de Montfort became the de facto king, taking 25-year-old Prince Edward as a hostage. The incompetent reign of King John and his son Henry III was characterized by political instability in the growth of Simon de Montfort's influence, leading to the signing of Magna Carta, the escalation of civil war, and ultimately, de Montfort's de facto rule and Prince Edward's captivity. Edward I, the fierce king. After escaping captivity, Prince Edward plots with barons against de Montfort to restore the Plantagenet crown and emerges victorious in the final showdown at Evesham in 1265. Edward is crowned King of England by law and practice, defeats Llywelyn the Last, and puts a puppet king on the Scottish throne. However, his enemies are now working together. Edward spends the rest of his life putting out fires in France and Scotland while worrying about his son's ability to rule. Edward II, a king undone by his loves. Edward II was an unexceptional individual, unworthy of his station as king, according to the barons. He abandoned his duties and wasted his time with favorites. First, it was Piers Gaveston, who many believed to be his lover. The outrage of the barons was palpable when Edward made Gaveston the Earl of Cornwall. When he was exiled, Edward rejected the barons and waged war. They captured and executed Gaveston, and Edward never forgave them. His new favorites, the Despensers, brought further unrest and war. Edward's cruelty and favoritism undermined his reign, leading to his downfall, as he neglected and humiliated his wife, Isabella. The Queen, her lover, and the king's demise. In 1325, Queen Isabella meets Roger Mortimer and falls in love. Together, they overthrow the troubled King of England and have him abdicate the throne to their son, Edward III. Mortimer becomes Isabella's consort, but their plan to rule indefinitely comes to an end when Edward III takes control of the government and executes Mortimer. Edward III becomes a skilled and charming sportsman who reopens the war with Scotland and starts the 100 Years' War against France. The rise and fall of kings. Edward III achieved great victories and reforms during his reign, but soon after his death, his son, the Black Prince, fell ill and his wife passed away. Edward III's heir, Richard II, became king but abused his power, leading to his overthrow by his cousin Henry Bolingbroke, who established the House of Lancaster. This marked the end of the Plantagenet dynasty as Richard II produced no heirs.
As we draw to a close on this riveting exploration of the Plantagenet dynasty, it becomes evident that these warrior kings and queens have left an indelible mark on England's history. The line of succession may have been filled with turmoil, treachery, and rebellion, but the legacy of the Plantagenets endures in England's modern political system, the Magna Carta, its legal framework, and the impressive castles that still stand today. Through gripping and illuminating storytelling, Dan Jones captures the essence of the Plantagenets, ensuring that the reader gains a comprehensive understanding of the historical context and human drama that shaped this powerful dynasty.